I am a massive The Black Dahlia Murder fan. So much so that the thought of making this video was actually painful for me when I first set out to do it. I want to talk about a lot of things with this band during the course of this video, and with that being said, some of the content is dark and deals with self-harm, so consider this your trigger warning. If you are new here or to this series of videos, my name is Taylor, and we are going to try and capture the magic, the majesty of the Black Dahlia Murder's tone. For those of you just looking for guitar noises, there are chapters below, but for the rest of you, we are going to deep dive into the lore around this band and explore some of the atmosphere that helped shape the tones we are exploring in this tone quest. There will be a lot of side questing, and we'll probably stumble upon some NPCs with rare loot as well. If that's something you're into, you're in the right place. Speaking of gear, I want to take this opportunity to thank today's sponsor, Sweetwater and Hosa cables. Even though I use their cables a lot in videos anyways, today we will be specifically using all Hosa cables. They also sent me this Little Bro 6x2 snake, which is really helpful in the studio. It means I don't have cables just running all over the place. So very cool. This video is a really personal one for me. I've actually put off listening to this band since former vocalist Trevor Strnad's, And yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna get through this without being emotional or wading into the obscurity of YouTube commentary, but I'm gonna do my best to keep this thing on the rails, so bear with me. Is it like bear, like grr bear, like a bear, manly man bear? The Black Dahlia Murder is a death metal band. Actually, let's just get this out of the way right now because I think it's important. A melodic death metal band from Waterford, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit. They take their name from one of the most brutal and infamous unsolved murders of all time, and I think that's actually a big component of understanding the underlying current of what makes this music so dark and oppressive. While their lyrical content deals a lot with horror and the macabre in a very general way, there are clear lyrical references to the unsolved homicide, leading me to believe that not only was the choice in name meant to reflect something about the band itself, but also that late vocalist Trevor Strnad was somewhat affected by the murder upon learning about it. As a matter of fact, he told the Aquarian in 2015, with death metal, it's all about trying to find the most gross, heinous, terrible, most monstrous thing you can find to name your band after, and the songs. It's part of the course with death metal, so I was trying to think of what is going to be the most scary name possible for this band. When I learned about the case, it was just so creepy. It made my skin crawl, and I was like, this is it. This case and crime is just so heinous, and it gives the band name a lot of power. If you check out the topics, it's just really heavy. I figured if it scared me, then it would be a good band name. That was the ticket. It has a special context in the States, even more so because her death kind of signifies the beginning of the dark times and the death of the American dream in a way. She came to Los Angeles with stars in her eyes, trying to become a famous actress and stuff, which is totally the American dream, Go to California and all your dreams will come true. But her murder was so significant that it just scared the whole nation at the time. It's just powerful. So for those of you not familiar with the heinous murder of Elizabeth Short, I would recommend familiarizing yourself with it if you want to truly appreciate where this band drew its early inspiration from. We will touch on this here briefly, but it's more of a topic for another video, maybe on my other channel. I've really been wanting to revive the Night Circles channel, so maybe this is where we'll start with that. Elizabeth Short's naked, mutilated body was found in the Lemare Park neighborhood of Los Angeles on January 15th, 1947. Her body was bisected, that means cut in half in layman's terms, with high precision between the L4 and L5 lumbar vertebrae. This, along with other precise mutilations of her body, led the coroner to suspect that her murder had been committed by someone with a high level of surgical experience. Among the various acts of defilement committed on her body, the one that stands out most to me at least is her mouth being cut ear to ear, likely while she was still alive. Now this is a crazy and kind of scary side quest, and we could go super deep on it, but I want to lay out this at least peripheral understanding of the murder and its impact so that you can understand the motivation behind the band's sound and what Trevor meant when he was discussing the choice to name the band after this infamous crime. Most of the reports on who Elizabeth Short was and even the information about the case is highly suspect, as it was extremely common for publications at the time to participate in yellow journalism, a term referring to the sensationalism and exaggeration of events, presumably to sell more newspapers. I'm really glad we don't have that problem in journalism anymore. A good example of yellow journalism being Reefer Madness, a film intended to scare teenagers and stigmatize and sway public opinion into demonizing cannabis, the effects of which can still be felt to this day. Okay, I just had to chime in here because I found this while I was editing and I thought it was interesting. One of the worst papers at the time in terms of yellow journalism was the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, which was owned by none other than William Randolph Hearst. And if you know the history on William Randolph Hearst, he's very active in the prohibition and scheduling of cannabis, a completely different rabbit hole, but one that I thought was interesting and worth mentioning. Anyway, back to the video. In the case of Elizabeth Short, the press referred to her as a prostitute and/or drug addict, a starry-eyed socialite who came to Hollywood to seek out fame and fortune. These are romanticized versions of events created to sell newspapers more than anything. And one of the more interesting and tragic aspects surrounding this case, because especially over the long 80 years since the murder has been committed, it's completely changed the public's perception of the factual events. The truth is, Elizabeth Short was just as complex a person as anyone else, and while she had been down on her luck and couch surfing among various friends, it's highly unlikely she was a prostitute or even promiscuous for that matter. Also, her motives for moving to Hollywood likely stem from a lung-related health condition, and after having surgery for said condition, her doctor's suggestion that she move to a milder climate than the native region near Boston, which she was from. Her father also lived in the LA area, so those are the most likely motivators for her relocation, as opposed to her wanting to become an actress, since there were no records of her ever attending an acting class, a casting call, or anything that would support this theory. So with all that said, that kind of throws a wrench in the whole romantic version of this story. I bring all this up because I think it's important to understand how the media likes to distort and twist events to fit an idealistic narrative. Young starlet comes to LA in search of fame and ends up on the streets selling her body, only to be gruesomely murdered. It literally sounds like an episode of Law & Order SVU by Dick Wolf. It's an absolutely over-sensationalized story, but one that likely contains more fiction than truth, and when Trevor decided to name his band after this crime, it really sets the tone for the atmosphere they were trying to create with their music. Which leads me to how I discovered the Black Dahlia murder's music personally. I actually discovered the Black Dahlia murder by accident when I was searching documents on LimeWire in 2002 or so. I know, I'm really dating myself here. I'm pretty sure what I found was a mixture of songs from their first and second EPs, A Cold-Blooded Epitaph and What a Horrible Night to Have a Curse, respectively. I was searching for documents because I had been reading Severed, The True Story of the Black Dahlia by John Gilmore, and reading that book and listening to this band's music really had a deep and profound impact on me. You know how sometimes you are going through something in your life and a certain band or album or even song can just etch itself into your brain and you just forever associate it with that time in your life? Well, that was certainly true of this time in my life and this band's music. I actually have a tattoo of a stylized spinal cord from a medical textbook, and when I saw them live for the first time, they had a shirt with the same stylized spinal cord on it. Could be coincidence, but it really did make me feel like I had a meaningful connection with the artistic nature of this band. The band released Unhollowed in 2003, and while it had been praised, I think of this album as sort of rough around the edges. It certainly has its charm, but even if you go to the Wikipedia page, it describes their early genre as metalcore. And if you think that's a ridiculous thing to say, well...
Black Dahlia Murder in the very early days was definitely metalcore as fuck.
While Unhollowed did have the early foundations for a sound they would come to be known for, and they did come from an era which is predominantly a metalcore era, they would soon come to find their own sound, which was sort of a more refined Gothenburg at the gates sort of sound. In 2005, the band released their follow-up Miasma, setting a trend of releasing a new album almost every 2 years. And to me, this is when the Black Dahlia Murder came into their own. They had parted ways with founding drummer Corey Grady and joined with the more blast beat-centric stickman Zach Gibson, and in listening to these albums back to back, you can really hear the transition to a more darker death metal focused sound. All of the tropes associated with metalcore were gone, and what was left was just a depressing and foreboding vibe that would be refined on later releases. I remember thinking at the time, oh, they toured with Nile, they must have picked up a bunch of influence from that band. But I really think that when you listen to Trevor talk about his inspiration from the band from the beginning, and keeping in mind why they named their band the Black Dahlia Murder in the first place, this sound is more fitting and representative of the original tone they set out to achieve. Now, this album was not received nearly as well as Unhollowed, and for good reason. I think sometimes as an artist, you have to decide to be true to yourself and do what you want to do rather than what you think your current fan base will want. It's half the reason I'm making this video right now. I know you guys want to see Megadeth and Pantera, etc. I swear it's coming. Just let me have this one first. Miasma and Nocturnal are the two albums we're going to focus on when it comes to making guitar tones. Now, to be honest with you, the guitar tone has never really stood out to me on a Black Dahlia Murder album. Not that it's bad or anything, but it always just sounded pretty stock, almost like it was a 5150 into a Mesa oversized cab or something. So when I started doing my preliminary research on this video, I was really surprised to see so many different opinions on this topic. I found threads talking about how they used Marshalls and ENGLs and even diesel amps. And besides, I'm pretty sure a riff-heavy guitar-centric band like this tinkers with different gear all the time. So I wanted to find out what they were using in the studio, starting with Miasma. This was surprisingly easy. I found this old thread on ultimatemetal.com, and when I was reading through it, I noticed that not only had one of the producers from Miasma, Red Planet, I'm not sure which producer this was, commented, but the thread was actually started by none other than one of my favorite death metal content creators, Mendel.
Hi, Mendel here. Hope you're doing awesome and wonderful.
In the thread, Red Planet described the recording of Miasma in pretty decent detail, actually. Miasma was recorded with a dual rec and a Krank Revolution. In the mix, we added a touch of an ENGL head for a little more top end. The whole thing was done to Pro Tools high definition with an API 3412 and a Vintech 1272. At the time, the only real compressor I had was an Empirical Labs Fatso. We mixed it tracks east with Eric Rachel through a Neotech Elite down to half-inch tape. The whole record is just 2 takes of guitar pan left and right, other than the overdub solos. Both players played all of their own parts rather than having one guy do the rhythms. So you can really hear 2 distinct players. One side has a slightly better rhythm, the other side has a slightly tighter picking hand. Nothing on the record was cheated, nothing was copied and pasted or looped. Most of the drum takes are 1 take. Obviously, there are some drum edits, but not as much as you'd think. There really was no editing on the guitars or bass. Make a note of that. We're gonna come back to this later. As compared to most metal records, you're hearing a real band playing, not some dude that sat in front of a computer for a month lining up every note. So on the lore end, this seems surprisingly easy to find, especially considering that there's not studio content from this album, but that's the great thing about albums recorded in the internet era, especially the early internet era. There's likely a blog post or Facebook post or something that exists somewhere from someone involved that can give you accurate information without you having to sift through old obscure fanzine interviews to figure out which microphone James Hetfield had up Lars's ass while Kirk was doing the Ride the Lightning solo. Sorry, I'm getting off topic. The next follow-up would come in 2007's Nocturnal, which is in my and many others' opinions, the magnum opus of the band's catalog. Now, it's not like they haven't had bangers since then or even put out good albums or anything, but this album marks a lot of solidification for the band. The Dark Throne-centric album art style, the slick and polished but somehow still raw AF production, and the refinement of their songwriting and we'll call it mood that they had experimented with on Miasma, which we can attribute, at least in part, to the previously mentioned studio discipline the band had to make every take count and not edit everything. This is definitely a whole subtopic and could be another video, and maybe I'm just showing my age and bias here, but I think that when you take music and strip it down to its mathematical components, making them all completely polished and perfect, like for example quantizing every drum hit and editing the guitars to be locked to a grid tighter than an enchanted witch hat sphincter.
What is it that's sort of puckering and sucking at the back of my head?
The witch's arsehole.
Oh, yes.
When you do all that, it really strips away what I enjoy out of the music. Side rant, I remember in the early 2000s liking a lot of hip hop that was coming out, but when I saw live performances, not understanding why people enjoyed it. It sounded like they were just playing the song over a PA while artists clumsily stumbled around on stage and only committed to half of their lyrics because they were out of breath and relied on the audience filling in the gaps. So finding out that the Black Dahlia Murder had that ethos and recorded these albums, at least with little to no editing, really makes a lot of sense, and I think it contributes to not only the overall experience of listening to the album, but at least in part why the guitar tones are so good. And when it comes to guitar tones on Nocturnal, I had a few cheats at my disposal. There's the accompanying documentary from this era, Majesty, but I was able to go directly to the source via the previously mentioned Chancellor of Class, Mendel. I also cross-referenced what he told me with another guitar YouTube legend, Jamie Slays, who happens to have music with none other than Nocturnal skin slammer Shannon Lucas, and here's where we ended up with all that. The primary rhythm tones were a 5152 and a Mesa oversized cap. I'm sure there is a lot of post-processing stuff happening that you are hearing in the final product, just like with anything else, but we are trying to catch the magic at the source here, not specifically recreate the album tone exactly. And I think when you go back to the notes from Miasma, them playing really tight and nailing these takes has a lot to do with what you were hearing on the final products. The Black Dahlia Murder has been known as a band that is really hardworking and super prepared and professional when they enter the studio. The fact that the guitars have no edits is really telling of that. I think a lot of that hard work is what you're hearing in the final product. So luckily for this video, I have most of what we need for the tones. I have a Mesa cab, I have a plethora of 5150s, but I do want to use my 6505 Plus, which is closer to the 5152 used on Miasma. I think it's in my storage space though. I have to go grab that. Okay, went to go plug in my 6505 Plus and it keeps blowing fuses. So that's not good. I do have my 5150 still, but then I thought, you know, maybe let's just take lemons and make some lemonade here. I have a 5150 𝐒𝐿𝐿. What we could do is we could use that. And also, last time I saw Black Dahlia Murder, they were using 𝐒𝐿𝐿𝐿s. They were using the EVH 5150 𝐒𝐿𝐿𝐿. So, you know, maybe this is for the best anyway. So I do have to take this amp back, put it back in that stack of amps, and then get my 5150 𝐒𝐿𝐿𝐿. Krank REV1, it's actually right here right now. I even have a few ENGLs, and my guess, specifically because of the top end reference, is they are talking about the Invader. I also did read this in a thread in my preliminary preparation for this video, but I can't cite the source because I forgot to save it. So you just have to take my word on that. The one thing I don't have is dual rectifier, but luckily I have a few options for that. I think we'll try the direct with the Synergy amp and see how that does. That means we are gonna have a lot of amplifiers to cover, so I'll try and be brief with them. For guitars, since Bryan is known for using EMGs, I have a wide variety to choose from, but there's actually one LTD that I think fits this bill really well. The problem is it's not exactly playable at the moment, so I need to fix that first. All right, so I have a guitar that I wanna use for this video. It is actually up in my attic right now. And we are gonna go with this guy right here, this LTD. And while I could have gone with maybe an Eclipse or something like that, this guitar is a little bit special to me. And I just thought I would take this opportunity to fix this guitar up as well, because I haven't played it in a long time and it definitely needs some love. So this is what we're working with here. This is my LTD MH300. Now what makes this guitar really interesting is it is a relatively inexpensive guitar, but it came with EMGs, an 81 and an 85. The 85 is not working right now, so I need to address that. It also comes with a licensed Floyd Rose. I mean, remember, this is sort of a budget level guitar, MH300. I don't know what the retail was on this, but it was not crazy expensive. And it is actually a neck through guitar made in Korea. Now, this was probably a little bit more common back in, you know, the early 2000s. I think when this guitar was made. And there's a few things that I really want to address on this guitar. Number one, the bridge. I want to swap this out. This thing is beat to hell. It has a hard time holding tuning. It's part of the reason that I don't ever play it anymore. And then the tuners as well. It'd just be nice to have like a nice set of Goto locking tuners on here. So we're gonna do that. And then I need to address the wiring as well, since one of the pickups like cuts out. So I have the Goto Magnum locking tuners here. I actually bought a Goto tremolo. I get a lot of people that are like, why don't you use a Goto? They're way better for the money. And you guys are usually right. So I just thought, what the hell, if I'm gonna swap out the tremolo, I might as well do it with something that everyone keeps recommending. And I have one of these on a Solar X series guitar that I like as well. Yeah. Let's install this stuff and fix this guitar. Okay, I know this is a very small part of the video, but there are some of you that are very detail oriented that want all of this information. If you want to see why I need to work on this guitar, I think this sort of illustrates that really well, besides the electronic malfunctioning. We're not going to use the neck pickup, you know what I mean? I just want it to work. Look at these frets, man. These frets are so... That one's not too bad. Like that one's pretty flat. They're just really, really worn out. This guitar is probably going to be a lot more work than I anticipated. As a result, I will probably skim through a lot of this stuff. So if you want to know anything, let me know down in the comments. And I will do my best to answer those comments. But yeah, I gotta get to work on this thing, or this video is never gonna come out. Okay, so a couple things I should probably admit to you right away. Number one, I'm not a luthier. I get comments on these videos sometimes saying things like, you know, you should stay away from guitars, things like that, which kind of mean. But, you know, I'm just doing my best here. I don't know, I'm trying to learn new skills while I'm making these videos at the same time. So I just followed, you know, the instructional video on Stu Mac on crowning and polishing frets, and I think that actually came out much better. I did scratch up the... Shit, this cam's gonna fucking fall and explode. Should put this somewhere safe. I did scratch up the fretboard a little bit. The aesthetics of this guitar are not super important to me. It's more like how it plays, what it feels like in the hands. Those qualities are the things that are a little bit more important to me. This guitar is pretty scratched up. It's pretty beat up. I've taken it on tour multiple times. You know, it's kind of cool. Those are like battle scars. I think it's neat, you know? Something I did just notice though, look at this. This is like a plate for the tremolo system. I wonder if this 𝐒𝐄𝐂𝐈𝐀𝐋 is going to fit on here, and if it's not, we're going to have to remove that thing and make new holes. This is going to be a whole bigger project, but hope for the best, right? Okay, just ran into a problem that I can't really get past here. So I had my 𝐒𝐄𝐂 tuners, and when I pulled everything out of the packaging, I noticed that 2 of these little nut things are missing. So I can't put those on. I'm gonna have to put the old tuning pegs back on, I think, for this video, which, you know, it's fine. It doesn't need locking tuners or anything like that, but it's unfortunate, but we're just gonna move forward. Alright, while this video is not really about this guitar, I thought I might as well measure the neck, because I'm sure, you know, at least one person out there is curious about this. I am curious about this, so I'm that one person. But I just wanted to see how thick the neck on this guitar actually is. Just call it 21. It's 20.96 up the first fret, 22.58 down here at the 12th fret. So, you know, I would call this a medium neck. I was trying to troubleshoot why this pickup wasn't working off camera, and after doing a bunch of soldering and stuff like that, I realized that the connector was not actually plugged into the EMG, so I must have yanked it loose at some point, whatever. So yeah, but it's plugged back in. Hopefully it works. The frets came out really, really good, despite having no idea what I'm doing. They're pretty level, and you know, they're much cleaner now and much better looking than they were prior. So yeah, there's that. Other than that, I'm just going to finish restringing this guitar, tuning it to C standard, my favorite tuning, as well as the tuning the Black Dahlia Murder uses. So we'll do that, and then I'll see you guys inside. Oh hey, guess what? The replacement tuners showed up before I even had a chance to shoot the part of this video. Just change the strings. I don't really want to redo all this. So I'm just going to leave these strings locked down. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Let's do it. What's up, guys? We are plugged into the Synergy head with the D-Rectifier preamp, with the D-Rect module, which is based off the dual rectifier. I don't know why that's sounding so weird to me right now. It's based off the dual rectifier module. You know what we just talked about these tones. You know what we're going for here. This is my solution because I don't have a dual rectifier. I think when you listen to the Miasma tones, you can hear that sizzly sort of top end of a dual rectifier. It makes a lot of sense actually that it's a dual rectifier. How I had it set up from the last time that I used it. Now, there are a few things that I have to say here right off the bat before we get further into this video. Number one, if you're like, why aren't you playing riffs from those albums? There's a great reason for that. In both of the tone questing videos that I made previously, I got copyright claims on those videos. Now, hold the phone. It's not like the bands or the labels that own the rights to the songs that I was tone questing after in those videos were copyright claiming my videos. No, it's like some sketchy companies from places that you've never heard of before. You guys probably know at this point, the copyright system on YouTube is really flawed. I choose to play riffs that are similar-ish enough so that way you can kind of, you know, hear the demonstration that I'm trying to do that for you and your ears. Oh man, I don't know if I'm making sense today. Hopefully you guys can understand that. We're just here to have a good time. Also, shout out to 𝐒𝐂𝐈𝐀𝐋. I'm using the 𝐒𝐂𝐈𝐃𝐋 cables here that they sent me. This one is a speaker cable in the back you can't see, and then a snake over here that you can't see on the floor. I'll put that on the screen right now. 𝐒𝐂𝐈𝐃 makes great stuff. I use it all the time regardless of sponsorship. I'm just really glad that they sponsored this video so that way I can, you know, copyright issues. And you can hear that scratchiness in the top end here. Let's mess around with this a little bit. Maybe let's cut the mids. Oh, I'm boosted. Let's turn the boost off, yeah? Jesus Christ, Taylor. A lot of bass. Let's cut the bass out. That sounds a lot like a dual rectifier to me. And a lot like the tone on the Black Dahlia Murder album also. Let's go ahead and boost that just to show you what that would sound like boosted, although I don't think that they boosted it, if I'm being honest. Back to something that I said earlier on in this video when I was talking about the tightness of their playing. Playing really good does affect your tone. And when things are tight and percussive, and you're especially a dual rectifier, like dual rectifiers are very sensitive to how hard you are playing. I think that them being really on in the studio probably speaks to that tone a little bit too. So for example, if I was picking softly, versus if I'm picking really hard, you get the idea. It's quite a big difference. Now, I don't want to deep dive too much on each one of these individual amplifiers because it would just make this already very long video much longer. But I do want to go over the tones on each one just to give you some familiarity with all of them. I am running the Devil in front of this, although I don't think we're going to boost most of these amplifiers. I don't think that they used a boost in the studio. We'll go over that more as we go through it. I'm running the amplifiers into my Mesa 4x12 cabinet. This is going to be the same cabinet for all the amplifiers in this video. And I think that the cabinet and the miking configuration is such a huge part of the tone in like all the videos I've done, not just this one, but I really think it's a big part of the tone. With that said, I am using an SM57 and a Voodoo Ribbon 1 on this cabinet. I will make an IR of this cabinet and miking configurations. That way you can download it for free and you can experiment with it on your own. I will leave it in my Discord. When you go into my Discord, look for the free things section. Please don't harass people in there asking for the free IR. Just, you know, use your eyeballs. It's on the side there, on the left. It says free things. It's pretty easy to find. You know, one more thing, like let's turn the gain way up here just for funsies. Let's turn the bass up a little bit, cut the mids, and maybe cut back on the treble and just hear what that does. Super chunky, super chunky. I don't think that the amp was set up that way, but I do like that you can get so much chunk out of this little module here. You know, side tangent here, I'm really glad that I chose this guitar to restore it and just fix it up and make it. It's playing so incredibly well. Man, if you could pick up one of these early 2000s LTD, like I'm sure their guitars now are good, you know, but if you could pick up one of these early 2000s LTDs, it's just really cool. It's really cool. Okay, let's move on to the next amplifier here that they talked about in the studio notes. Not really studio notes, but you know, the forum post thing. Let's move over to the next amplifier they were talking about, the Krank REV1. Okay, now we're plugged into one of my all-time favorite amplifiers. This is my Krank REV1 Plus. The difference between the REV1 Plus and the REV1s that were probably used, if I'm guessing, just because of the time frame, the REV1s that were used on the album. This is originally a 6550 amplifier. I have KT88s in here. The REV1s would have been 6L6 amplifiers. So there you go. This is what it sounds like the way I have it dialed in right now. I never play this amplifier without boosting it. I think it's an absolutely necessary amplifier to boost. However, while I was tone questing for this video, I actually found that it sounds pretty good without a boost. You just have to turn the gain way up. Now what's cool about this, as opposed to the dual rectifier that we just checked out, the dual rectifier is very warm, but like kind of tubby sounding, and then it has like a very kind of sizzly top end. This one, you have this sweep knob, and the sweep knob is super powerful. So basically you can go from like a very warm sound to a more pushed mid sound. just really cool. It makes this amp super, super versatile. Now, again, I don't want to deep dive into these amplifiers. I kind of want to talk about a few of the things that I like specifically about this amplifier because I just enjoy this amplifier so much. Let me show you what this amplifier sounds like boosted. I would probably roll the gain back to about noon. And we have the Devil set up in a way that's very neutral, very, very similar to like a TS9 or something like that. So, you know, just for shits and giggles there, I just wanted to show you the difference of that. This is a great amplifier. It's one of my favorite all-time amplifiers. It's definitely been one of my go-tos for a lot of years. Let's move on to the curveball in the Miasma tones, the ENGL Invader. Okay, lastly here for Miasma, I'm plugged into my ENGL Invader. Often when I am looking at my ENGL amplifiers, I look at the Invader and the Savage and I'm like, why do I have both of those? Why do I have both these amplifiers? It seems kind of redundant. They're both 4-channel high gain amplifiers from the same manufacturer, but the Invader has quite a different top end. So when I was reading initially about the tones on Miasma, and then I read that they blended in an ENGL amplifier, the first thing I thought was, oh, yeah, I read about the Invader in the thread. That makes a lot of sense. We're on channel 3 right now. It's kind of similar to the dual rectifier. Let's go over to channel 4 here and you can hear the we're mostly dialed in the same. It's quite a bit different, and it's not dissimilar to the mid control on the Savage where you can have like the mid bold and then, you know, like the mid cut sort of sound. It's not dissimilar to that, but just the top end on channel 4 is just, it's different. Yeah, just really cool amplifier. We will blend this in. Later on, I will do an in the mix sort of demonstration where we can test like console emulation and stuff like that since I can't afford the microphone preamps that were used on these productions. We will also test blending the different amplifiers together and see what kind of sounds that we get. Now we're gonna move over to the nocturnal tones and the 5150 iconic. Okay, now we are talking about the nocturnal era of Black Dahlia murder. They would have used a 5152 head and a Mesa cab. Obviously I don't have a 5152 head, and you guys saw earlier my 6505 Plus died, unfortunately. But I think it all worked out for the best for a couple of reasons. I do like to do more budget options in these videos. And in terms of fully featured tube amps, I don't know that there's a better budget option than the 5150, you know, unless you go down to smaller like 50 watt amps or lunchbox set, like the MT15 is a really strong contender for a tube amp. But when we're talking about fully featured full-size tube amplifiers, the 5150 iconic is hard to beat, man. It really is. The last time I saw the Black Dahlia murder, they were using 5150 iconic. So, you know, obviously there's something to that. And that's just the amp tone. We're not boosting anything. We're on the red channel. We do have the burn switch engaged. Just for funsies, let's do without the burn switch. Now let's talk about one of the overpowered modes on any 5150 series amplifier, something that I don't think gets enough credit, the green channel. Let's go to the green channel here with the overdrive on, and you know, the gain's at 50% there. And if we boost this channel, now, were they using this in the studio? I have no idea. I think there's probably the red channel on a 5152. Sounds a little bit stock metal for lack of a better word. But, you know, I think that this is a cool option too. And I just wanted to, you know, talk about it and play it a little bit. But let's turn this back off. Let's go back to the red channel again. Just one more time for good measure. Okay, let me explain what's going on here. I made this song. It's just like a quick demo song to go over some of these tones and stuff. I wish I could have done a cover song, but we talked about that earlier. I don't want to get a copyright claim from, you know, some company in South America. So I'm going to reamp the guitars through each one of these amplifiers, and then we'll go over some mixing stuff here in a second. For those of you that don't know what reamping is, let me briefly explain this. This is the sound that comes directly out of the guitar. This is what I have recorded. Signal is coming out of my Quantum HD8 right here, and it is going over here across the room into, actually it's going into this DI box so I don't get excess noise. That is going into, right now I'm using the ENGL Invader, and that is going into this load box here. And then we have the microphones and the line out from the Boss Tube Expander going into this little bro Subsnake here from HOSA. Now I'm not using the microphones in this case, but this is how I do it in videos for reference. Just realized I probably could be using these 1/4 inch connections to make even less of a mess here and not have this guitar cable running through the middle of my room, but oh well. And this is running back to my Quantum HD8 audio interface, meaning that I have a little bit more control over the variables because we'll be adding an IR in post. Again, if you want that IR, the Mesa Oversized 4x12 is like the most common IR probably out there, but I will leave that one that I made for this video for free over in my Discord. Yeah, let's get to reamping all these guitars and then we'll go into the mixing portion here and talk about that a little bit. Okay, I have this project opened up here. I just made this demo song that's sort of like representative of, you know, that sort of sound because we talked about this earlier, the copyright issues. So let's start with the Miasma tones here. Now I am gonna try and play a little clip from Miasma, but if you're watching this video and it's not there, it's because of the aforementioned copyright issues, even though technically this would be fair use, but you know, what are you gonna do? So this is the Miasma tone that I came up with. Let's break that down a little bit here. I'm just gonna solo the guitars. Let me show you how I blended these here. I used the crank as the main tone, and the reason that I did that is because I felt like the crank had the most sort of dry, unique-ish mid-range. And then to recover some of that bottom end, I blended in the direct. And then to kind of like, you know, just smooth out the overall top end, I blended in the Invader. Now, I am using some console emulation. I have this plugin of an API console. It's like the closest thing I could find to what was described in that forum. You can see here, there's nothing like super crazy going on. I'm making it a little bit brighter and there's like some filtering happening. Let's do this on and off and you can see what's happening to the tone, and I will level these in post so that we're not hearing volume differences. And let's see if I can get away with playing a snippet from Miasma. You know, we're not exact, but you get the idea. Another big takeaway here is you should take all of this with a grain of salt, because when you're dialing in an amplifier to try and get an album sort of sound, there's so much happening in the production that changes the sound of the guitars, you know, in the mixing process, in the mastering process. It's just all things that should be taken into consideration. But when we're talking about Miasma, my takeaway from this, especially compared to Nocturnal, is it's more of like a organic sort of mid-focused sort of sound. So let's go back to my mix here and compare this to the Nocturnal sound with the 𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐀𝐋. Now, again, all of these are using the same cab IR that I created off my Mesa Oversized cabinet. I feel like that's so much of the tone. You can hear the similarities in the tone with the cabinet emulation. But with the 𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐀𝐋 to try and match the Nocturnal sound more accurately, there's a lot more post-production happening, a lot more stuff going on in the mix here. So I'm not sure exactly what sort of mixing tools were used, if they were using console emulation, if they were mixing in a box. I didn't have those sort of notes. So I just went to my go-to, which is a solid state Logic plugin here. And you can see I'm really pushing the high mids here as well as the mids. I mean, we have like a 6 decibel bump. I'm pushing the high end a lot, which is making that sound a lot more percussive and aggressive. Let's compare this to the actual Nocturnal album tone. Again, if you don't hear this, is because copyright reasons, even though fair use. Yeah. You know, another takeaway here is even though these are really comparable sounds, especially in my case using the same IRs, what's happening in the mix can change things, especially where the guitars are sitting, quite a bit. So let me show you with this on and off. Again, I'll balance the levels in post so we're not hearing volume differences. The last takeaway here that I want to share with you is how much fun this whole process is. I just think it's really cool that we live in a time where we can do stuff like this, where I can create videos like this and share them with people across the internet, because it wasn't too long ago that, you know, this was just, this was not possible in the way it is today. And I think that, again, the process is the important part. The process is the fun part. And that's what we should be focusing on, no matter what gear you have. If you're a bedroom producer, you know, or if you're like a mix engineer and you're creating a full album, I think, again, the process and the fun of it is like where the cool stuff comes from. I hope the enjoyment and the fun from this process translates, because to me, that's the most valuable part of it. In the debate of where tone comes from, there's the old adage of tone is in the hands, and it continually gets brought up, which I'm mostly dismissive of, if I'm being honest. But I think in this context, there is something to that. Tone is not necessarily in the hands, but playing is. And playing well and tight can result in the perception of a much better guitar tone, especially on an album in a full mix. Look, there's absolutely no guitar tone in modern metal production more common than a 5150 and a Mesa cap. But the fact is that some bands just make it sound better than others. And I'm sure at least a small part of that can be attributed to the tightness of the playing. Now I want to get into kind of the darker part of this video. I intentionally put this at the end for those of you that might be sensitive to it, so if it gets cut out, that's because YouTube flagged it and age restricted by video, which is emblematic of the problem we have as a society with this topic. I will leave a full uncut version over on my Patreon for free if that's the case. The reason I've avoided listening to this band for literal years now is because it just feels painful. I didn't know why at first, but after starting to write this video and going through my typical process of marinating in the music and the band's history, I understand it a lot more now, and I'm pretty glad I ended up making this video because of it. This band was a huge influence on me, and I have a lot of core memories attached to it. When Trevor Strnad deleted himself off this earth, it had a pretty big impact on me. I don't know any of the band members personally though, so what's the deal with that? When I first started writing this video, I just wanted to know why. Why would someone with seemingly so much success and adoring fans be driven to such an extreme act of violence? I started reading about it and going through forums on opinions, and much like the tones, it was surprisingly all right there. Trevor had this ideation since the early days of the band. He was very open about his struggles with anxiety and depression. My original thought was that maybe he was in a dark place and the OnlyFans saga with his girlfriend, one that I will not go into in this video, was an indication of that. But really, the more I looked, the more I found him talking really openly about his struggles with mental health.
And you stop doing these like cyclic kind of thinking, like of self-defeating. You know, I've been a lot better now, but there was times when shit got pretty fucking dark for me over the last 2 years.
And unfortunately, much like the music and the artistic nature of the band, this is something else I identify with. There's one particular interview where Trevor discusses his struggles with anxiety specifically. Something that I've discovered about myself in the last few years is that I really don't have typical depression. I feel depressed sometimes, but it's often stemming from my anxiety about something. Usually it's me worrying that the things I do aren't good enough, or I'm letting the people around me down in some way. Like, for example, I can have the best financial month of my life, but then immediately have anxiety that I won't be able to achieve that again or maintain it, or that I'm going to be broke and not be able to afford my mortgage or something. I can have a video blow up and do really well on YouTube, and my immediate feeling is that it's a fluke. I'll never do it again, which leads me down another spiral of negative self-depreciating thoughts. And when you're in those hopeless spirals, sometimes you just wish there was a reset button. Social media can exacerbate this by making me feel like I'm not achieving the same success as my peers, or that I'm not even deserving of any success I do achieve. Things that honestly feel pretty trivial when I say them out loud. But I live with this anxiety because for whatever weird, twisted reason, it pushes me forward and makes me do things. Funny enough, the thing that really gave me this aha moment was a Pixar movie called Inside Out 2. If any of you have ever seen that, you probably know what I'm talking about.
I'm not good enough. You have to score, Ronny, or this will all have been for nothing.
Also, I watched it because I have kids. I'm not just a weirdo or something. And at least in part, the reason many of us are drawn to this type of music is it makes us feel better about our own inner turmoil that we're dealing with on a daily basis. There's an undeniable link between music and human emotion. And while it may not be the case for everybody who listens to heavy music, it is true that some of us, whether consciously or not, use it as a cathartic experience to deal with our own inner pain. And sometimes just talking to someone about it who understands human psychology can help. Which is why this video is brought to you by BetterHelp. Just kidding, I'm just trying to lighten the mood. Can you imagine if this whole video was a setup for a BetterHelp ad? Fucking rude. But back to the topic. It is important to be able to talk about these things freely, and it's really discouraged in our society. Like, I can't even say the words that we use to describe the weight of the situation on YouTube because it's not safe for advertisers. How dumb is that? I'm trying to have a dialogue about a problem that predominantly affects the demographic of people who watch this channel. But that's why I wanted to open up and share my experience here. I don't like talking about it, and it's uncomfortable, but that's the point. Sometimes just knowing other people feel the same way, or hearing about other people's experiences and how they are working through them, and that you aren't alone, is enough to make the cold, apathetic existence of life meaningful enough to continue on. Your life has value, and if you get anything from this video, I hope it's that. And going back to the yellow journalism around Elizabeth Short's murder, see, that was a setup. I swear, I'm good at my job. I find it ironic that in many ways Trevor's death is sensationalized and twisted to make clickbait headlines similar to the crime from which the band takes its name. It's obviously not the same in scope. Elizabeth Short's murder, being one of the most heinous in American history, clearly has more headlines and led to a longer news cycle. But if you just search Trevor Strnad death on YouTube, you'll get all sorts of misrepresentations of what happened, many of those without any real meaningful answers. And while I was researching for this video, the thing that hit me in both Trevor's death as well as the death of Elizabeth Short is sometimes there's no answers. Sometimes there's just pain and loss, and you have to sit with it. And that's part of the human experience, for better or for worse. But through all that tragedy, it wouldn't feel right to not commend the band for moving forward, and in a way that I think was probably the most respectful to their audience, by having the last remaining original member, Bryan, step up and do vocals. I saw them on their first tour with Bryan on vocals, and while it was not the same as with Trevor, it didn't feel as weird as it would have had they brought in an outsider to front the band. And I think that was a really great way for them to move forward, and I hope they keep this going for years to come. Okay. I'm not gonna end on this bummer ass note. I can't cover any songs without labels stealing my ad revenue, but that doesn't mean we can't have fun. Let's have some fun.